Thank you, Theo, for the opening video. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. I thank you for your participation in this elaborasi opportunity. Welcome to the webinar Elaborasi, eranya ngobrolin public policy. Elaborasi is an initiative made by the Research Center for Public Policy, National Research and Innovation BRIN. I am Andrian Shah, and I'm honored to be your host for today's important discussion. Our theme for today's webinar is From Mandate to Impact, Advancing Evidence-Based Policymaking in Indonesia's Governance Practice. This is a critical and timely conversation as we collectively strive to bridge the gap between research and decision making. We want to ensure that policies are grounded in data, context, and measurable outcomes. Before we begin, allow me to warmly welcome all participants, policy researchers, academics, government representatives, students, and other stakeholders from local to national level, joining us from various institutions and regions. We also welcome the chairman of the Research Organization for Governance, Economy, and Community Welfare, Pak Agus Eko. Welcome, Pak, to the webinar. And also we welcome Ibu Yanwar Wismayanti, the head for Research Center for Public Policy, BRIN. We also have joined with us three amazing speakers. Professor Babachan from James Cook University. Welcome, Professor Hurriyat. It's nice to have you again with us. We also have Mr. Azwar Aswin, a senior researcher from the Research Center for Public Policy BRIN. And also will be later joining us is Mr. Eka Chandrabuana, Deputy for Macro Planning and Development at Bappenas. And together we will discuss this critical issue about advancing evidence-based policymaking in Indonesia's governance practice. And before we begin our discussion, to formally open our event, we are privileged to have Dr. Agus Eko Nugroho, who will deliver the opening remarks. Please welcome Dr. Agus Eko Nugroho. Thanks is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Mas Andri. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Very good morning, everyone. The excellent speaker, Prof. Hurriyat Babachan. Thank you once again, Prof. Hurriyat, for your availability to have today. And also Mr. Azwar Aswin from Research Center for Public Policy, and also Bapak Eka Chandrabuana, Deputy of Economic Affairs Bappenas. This event is very important for Indonesia, especially who eager to promote the economic development, as well as achieving for the golden era of Indonesia in 2045, the advancing evidence-based policy making in Indonesia governance practice. So we know that how to attend the good policy making process is critical, as well in the complex system of development, where the socio-economic and cultural are always interlinking together in affecting our daily life, and especially how the governments to plan and engage in development process always challenging. The question is on how we as the academician undertaking research are helpful or providing a clue to help to contribute to the policy making process. So the long experience of the speaker, I think it's very important to discuss this issue and also learn and learn uh, from their experience to provide the uh, uh, academic contribution to the policy making process. Once again, thank you very much for this speaker and also audience for this discussion. Hopefully that we can have a new insight for this morning discussion. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Pak Agus, for the warm welcome and point out the main importance of this event, of this webinar and the discussion. As Pak Agus already mentioned, the topic we are discussing today, from mandate to impact, advancing evidence-based policymaking in Indonesia's governance practice. It comes from the concern where evidence-based policymaking has long been mandated in Indonesia through regulations such as Law Number 12 of 2011, which requires the inclusion of academic studies and research as scientific justification for legislation, either in the local or national level, in the ministries, all over the governance institution. While this approach is embedded in policy instruments like the Policy Quality Index, we have Policy Quality Index in Indonesia, initiated by LAN. Its actual implementation remains problematic. Scholars have highlighted the structural power imbalance, varying interpretations of evidence. In research, usually, even though we come with the same evidence, but the interpretation can be vary. To mirror or just formalities, lacking genuine influence on policy decisions. So we conduct this discussion with the objectives. We have three main objectives. First, to inform the public, researchers, and authors about the dilemma in implementing evidence-based policy in Indonesian context. The second objective is to explore and share best practice of policy research that are adaptable to researchers and policymakers. We have our honorable speaker, Professor Hurriyat, who long have experience in research in public policy, the Asia, Australia, best practice of policy research. And objectives is to provide cutting-edge insights for researchers and policymakers on how to empower evidence-based policymaking in Indonesia. Hopefully, we can achieve those objectives through our discussion this morning with our distinguished speakers. So without further ado, we invite the first speaker with us, Bapak Azwar Aswin. Bapak Azwar Aswin right now is a senior researcher from the Research Center for Public Policy, and he also served as the coordinator for research group in the research group of public participation. Previously, he served as a researcher in the State Administration Agency or Lembaga Administrasi Negara LAN. He has his master's study double degree. It's Master of Administrasi Publik and Magister of Science in American Studies. And we can welcome are you with us, Ari?
Yes,
Hello?
yes.
Okay, thank you. So, Pak Azwar Aswin will deliver the first topic, which is policy research as a means of public participation in policy process, a reflection to post-reformation Indonesia. So, if you're ready, Pak Azwar, you can start present your topic.
Okay,
Time is yours.
thank you, Mas Andriansyah. I would like to greet Chairman of the Research Organization for Governance, Economy, and Community Welfare, Dr. Agus Eko Nugroho, and Head of the Research Center for Public Policy, Dr. Yanwar Farida Wismayanti, our distinguished speakers today, Professor Hiriat Babachan and Mr. Eka Chandrabuana, and all participants in this webinar. It's an honor to be with you today to reflect on an important question, I think. How can research become more than just knowledge? How can it become a force for public engagement and democratic progress? As we know, Indonesia's journey since Reformasi has been one of transformation from centralized power toward greater openness and democratic governance. And along the way, new questions have emerged. How can ordinary citizens have a say in the decisions that affect their lives? And how can we ensure that policy is made not just with authority, but with evidence and public input or public participation? And in post-reformasi Indonesia, policy research has become an important way for the public to take part in shaping the decisions. So I will start with reflection on public participation. So in 2016, Pramusinto notes that during the Reformasi era, policy formulation involved a prolonged process of public consultation. So since the Reformasi era began, the way policies are made has changed quite a bit. In the New Order era, the process was mostly controlled by the bureaucracy with strong backing from technocrats and the military who were seen as keeping development stable. But as Pramusinto points out, things shifted during the Reformasi, policymaking opened up to more public involvement. And nowadays, though with so many political parties in the mix, getting policies through takes a lot more time than in the New Order era. So this is a picture that I see in Instagram, and I think it reflects the broader idea of what is public policy in Indonesia now. So back in February, there was a student protest called Indonesia Gelap. And during the protest, one student grabbed attention by holding a poster that read, "Policy is not born from academic papers, but from tasting the waters." And in my opinion, this was a really powerful message. It shows how policy research works or doesn't work in Indonesia. And there's a big gap between using research to make decisions and how things actually happen. In practice, policies are often made by political moves and quick reactions, especially in the post-reformasi. And in Indonesia now, any assertion of evidence-based policymaking, as noted by Rahmani and Sakia, any claim of evidence-based policymaking should be taken with caution if there is no clear academic rigor behind it. This kind of surface-level connection can compromise the quality of policymaking, even though researchers might provide evidence. They may end up being used just to legitimize policies without properly evaluating their actual value and impact. So evidence can end up being used just to legitimize or just as a stamp in Indonesia right now. But there is a good news from Colonia et al. In 2025. He and his colleagues wrote a recent article and published in Nature Human Behavior. The article gives us a clear picture. It looked at public trust in scientists across 68 countries, and here are some interesting highlights. Egypt came out on top with the highest trust score of 4.30, and the United States ranked 12th with a score of 3.86, and Indonesia was right behind the United States, scoring 3.84. And China came in at 29th with 3.67, and Albania was at the bottom of the ranking with 3.05. And what does that tell us? People in Indonesia still have a strong trust in scientists. That's a big deal. And it's the kind of trust we really shouldn't take for granted. So this is the good news. And the study also revealed some interesting findings, particularly regarding the question of whether scientists should take an active role in policy making. Let's go through the findings from top to bottom of the chart. First, scientists should work closely with politicians. So this idea receives moderate support. Most respondents agree that collaboration between scientists and policymakers is important, but some are cautious. There's concern that too much involvement might blur the line between science and politics. And the second one, scientists should actively advocate for specific policies. This is the most debated issue. While some respondents agree, a significant portion are unsure or disagree. The hesitation likely comes from a desire to keep science neutral rather than aligned with specific political agendas. Scientists should communicate their findings to politicians. This receives broad support. Respondents clearly see value in scientists sharing evidence with decision makers. It is seen as a core role of science in public life. And the fourth, scientists should be more involved in policymaking. Public opinion here is mixed. Some respondents think scientists should play a bigger role in shaping policy, while others prefer they stick to advising rather than participating directly in political process. And the last one, scientists should communicate about science with the general public. This is where the strongest agreement. A large majority of respondents believe that scientists have a responsibility to explain science in a way that's understandable and accessible to everyone. So, to be short, 83% of respondents expect scientists to communicate with the general public. And furthermore, 54% of respondents would like scientists to work closely with politicians to integrate science into policymaking. And regarding activist involvement, 49% believe scientists should be engaged in policy advocacy. And in simple terms, respondents expect scientists not just to remain in their ivory towers, but to actively participate in public affairs, not for their own interests, but for the benefit of society. So this is the main argument that science is for society. And in Indonesia right now, I think we have to note that a study from Davidson that points out that storytelling is becoming an important communication tool that scientists need to use in their strategies, especially when talking to policymakers. But it is not just about policymakers, actually. This is also key for connecting with the public in general. People actually expect scientists to communicate with them and advocate for policy issues. If scientists or researchers aren't good at storytelling, it is no surprise, as Tim Nichols mentions in his book, The Death of Expertise, that they might struggle to get their message across effectively. Influencers and buzzers, on the other hand, often master this skill and, as a result, are more likely to be heard. So storytelling is a powerful tool that brings researchers closer to both the public and policymakers, helping to bridge the gap and make complex ideas more relatable. And when it comes to policymaking, there are three key players: the public, policy researchers, and policymakers. The public plays an important role by engaging in the debates and discussions about policy issues. They can speak up through protests, surveys, or consultations, helping to shape what policies are needed in the first place. And then policy researchers are the ones who dig into the data, analyze trends, and provide evidence-based recommendations. They essentially act as the bridge between what's happening on the ground and what needs to happen in policy terms, offering insights that can guide effective decision making. And the last, policymakers in turn listen to both the public and researchers. They are tasked with responding to the needs of the public, crafting laws and regulations that reflect this need, and making sure their decisions are informed by the best available evidence. Now, we can imagine if we mainstream policy research as a key path for public participation. By making research a central part of how people get involved, we could ensure that policies in Indonesia are not just reactive or testing the water or politically convenient, but actually grounded in facts and data. This approach could make policymaking much more transparent and inclusive, leading to better policies that truly meet the needs of society. When policy researchers, policymakers, and the public work together, we get a more robust and transparent policymaking process. Researchers provide the evidence, policymakers translate it into action, and the public ensure that these actions are in line with their needs. This ongoing collaboration not only makes policies more effective, but also help build trust between all the parties involved. In the end, it's about creating policies that make a real difference in people's lives and contribute to a stronger, more connected society. And in conclusion, making policy research a real way for the public to get involved only works if there is a constant collaboration, solid academic work, and a genuine commitment to using evidence, not just to back up decisions or legitimize decision or just a stamp, but to truly shape policies that make a difference. I think that's all that I want to talk today, and we can elaborate this in the discussion section. Thank you, Mr. Andriansyah. I give it back to you.
Thank you, Pak Azwar, for the insightful explanations of your topic. We really have a lot in mind. We're talking about policy research as a means of public participation in policy process. Pak Azwar started with the reflection of public participations and reflection to evidence and how Indonesia's political landscape has developed from the new order until now, post-Reformation Indonesia, and still we face a lot of challenges here. And several points that is interesting to explore further. For example, that in Indonesia's recent development, as Pak Azwar explained, policy is not born from academic studies or academic research, but from testing the water, or we usually call it as cek ombak. If the wave is good, we go on full power. But if the waves fight back, then we'll just get rid of the policy and back to business as usual, like nothing happens. That's actually what happens in our daily life right now. And it is also interesting that 83% of respondents agree that researchers should communicate with general public, which many researchers are perhaps struggling in this matter. And also more than 50% of respondents agree that researchers should work closely with politicians. Again, this is something that perhaps researchers also need to reflect on ourselves. Luckily, we have our speakers today from Bapenas and also Prof. Hurriyat Babachan, who will share a lot of experiences on this issue. So we now move on to the second speaker. We have unfortunate updates from Bapenas that Mr. Eka Chandra Buana, Deputy for Macro Planning and Development, cannot join with us because he needs to what is it? He needs to go with the minister of Bapenas in a very strategic meeting. So the topic will be delivered by Bapak Uke Muhammad Hussein. Bapak Uke Muhammad Hussein, are you with us?
Yes. Terima kasih Pak Andri.
Thank you Pak Uke Muhammad Hussein. How should I call you, sir? Pak Uke, Pak Hussein, Pak Muhammad? Pak Uke, sorry. Uke.
Thank you.
Okay, Pak Uke Muhammad Hussein will deliver the second topic, which is transformative policymaking in the national development planning process. Just for a short review, he now serves as Director for Productivity Improvement and Thematic Development Planning at Bapenas. He works at Bapenas from 2002, ya Pak, more than 20 years ago. It's a very long career. And he holds bachelor degree in geography from Universitas Indonesia and master's in public policy from the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies, GRIPS, Tokyo, Japan. So we are now in the phase of very expert bureaucrat, I can say. Bapak Uke, times is yours, sir.
Thank you, Pak Andri. Good morning, everyone. Actually, Pak Eka Chandra already prepared his presentation and also speech, so allow me to deliver his his speech and also his apa namanya by the title is Transformative Policy Making in the National Development Planning Process. Let me read his speech. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning and greeting to all of us. Before I start, I would like to respectfully acknowledge Bapak Dr. Agus Eko Nugroho, Chairman of the Organization for Governance, Economy and Community Welfare, RIN, Ibu Yanwar Frida Wismayanti, Head of the Research Center for Public Policy, Excellency Professor Hurriyat Babachan, PhD, from James Cook University, Australia, and also Bapak Aswar Aswin, MAP MSc, researcher at Research Center for Public Policy, BRIN. Next slide, please. Yeah, also. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, as we all aware that Indonesia faces a rapidly changing global landscape that presents both challenges and opportunities, global tension, risk of trade wars, and the ongoing energy and digital transition are reshaping the global economy and international relations. Domestically, Indonesia must simultaneously focus on accelerating economic growth, enhancing the quality of human capital, and improving resilience to global disruption. This challenging requires a more adaptive, evidence-based approach to policymaking that can effectively address both global uncertainties and local needs. With 2023 Government Effectiveness Index score of 69.81, and the score Indonesia remains behind regional leaders like Singapore that got 100 score in government effectiveness. This gap in governance underscores the necessity for adaptive development planning that relies on accurate data and robust analysis to guide decision making. Therefore, Indonesia must prioritize evidence-based policymaking, or ABPM, to ensure that our policies are not only well-informed, but also adaptive to the changing global and domestic landscape. Next, in Indonesia, evidence-based policymaking, or EBPM, is legally mandated under Law Number 12 of 2011 concerning the formation of legislation. This law requires all government institutions to base their policies on well-documented academic paper, ensuring that decisions are informed by thorough research and evidence. So it's mandated by law, and government also support EBPM through national tools like the Policy Quality Index, which is designed to assess and promote the quality of public policies based on their alignment with evidence. Despite these mandates, the practical application of EBPM is often limited, while the legal and institution framework exists. The implementation of EBPM faces significant challenges. For example, academic papers are often treated as a formality rather than a core part of policymaking process. There is also a power imbalance where decision makers prioritize political or short-term consideration of a research-based evidence. Furthermore, a gap between research and policymaking persists, which limits the overall quality and impact of public policies. Addressing these challenges requires a strong partnership between researchers, policymakers, and other stakeholders. Next slide. This brings us to the central role of Bappenas in Indonesia development planning architecture. Bappenas, the Ministry of National Development Planning, is Indonesia's central institution responsible for formulating, coordinating, and monitoring the country's national development plan. This includes aligning development priority with long-term national goals, economic condition, and societal needs. As the key agency in the development planning process, Bappenas ensures that policies and plans are designed to support sustainable growth and national resilience. Bappenas is responsible for key strategic documents that guide Indonesia development trajectory, such as National Long-Term Development Plan 2025 to 2045 and the National Medium-Term Development Plan 2025 to 2029. This plan sets the direction for Indonesia's development over decades and article for addressing both domestic and global challenges. GOBS is also in the process of formulating the 2026 Government Annual Work Plan, or we say in Bahasa RKP, a responsive and adaptive policy instrument designed to navigate global uncertainties and meet current national needs. The 2026 RKP carries the theme of food sovereignty, energy sovereignty, and productive and inclusive economy. Next. The formulation of RKP 2026 is a highly in process that involves a wide range of stakeholders, including government officials, regional representatives, and the private sector. It draws from various national forums, we call it in Bahasa Rakortek Renbang, Rakorbang Pus, FKP, Musrenbang Prof, and even limited cabinet meeting in the State Palace. Rakortek Renbang, Rakorbang Pus, Musrenbang Prof is a development forum that all stakeholders, especially in government side, meet together and discuss what policy should be drawn for the next year. This consultation ensures the final plan aligns with both national priorities and regional development needs, fostering a unique national vision for growth. Governance goes beyond just planning. It is also about ensuring that Indonesia development strategies are adaptable and responsive to the changing global landscape. Next. With a strong foundation in planning and policy coordination, Bappenas is committed to integration transformative approach into the policy-making process. As Indonesia faces complex and interconnected challenges, a transformative approach to policy-making becomes essential. This approach emphasizes innovation, data integration, and collaboration to craft adaptive, inclusive, and forward-looking solutions, particularly in areas such as climate change, food security, and economic inequality. The goal is to ensure that the policies are not just reactive, but proactive, anticipating future needs and challenges. There are four key pillars of transformative approach. The first is consolidating data through a national evidence hub. This is a central feature of this approach is the establishment of national evidence hub. By consolidating data from various sectors, Indonesia can create comprehensive, accessible resources that provide insight for evidence-based decision-making. Bappenas has initiated this effort with Satu Data Indonesia. There remain significant room for improvement in terms of the quality, system integration, and coordination across institutions. By the way, Data Indonesia One Data. The second, fostering partnership between researchers and planners. Collaboration between researchers, policymakers, and development planners is essential. This partnership ensures that research findings are translated into actionable policy recommendations, bridging the gap between academia and government. The third, adapting and innovating planning mechanism. The development planning process must evolve to meet to the demand of rapidly changing world. This means adopting innovative planning mechanisms that can incorporate new technology, methodologies, and practices. Several provinces such as West Java, South Kalimantan, and Central Sulawesi have demonstrated creative and locally driven innovation in their planning process, offering valuable models for broader adoption. And the fourth, leveraging technology and predictive analytics. Technology is a key enabler in this transformation approach. By utilizing predictive analytics and other advanced technologies, Indonesia can better anticipate future trends and challenges. The transformative approach equips Indonesia with the tools needed to create policies that are more inclusive, effective, and sustainable, ultimately improving the quality of life for its citizens. Next. One of the most notable examples of Bappenas' commitment to transforming Indonesia development planning is its collaboration with the UN Global Pools. This partnership showcases how data and technology can be integrated into real policy application. One ongoing project under this collaboration is data-driven decision on free nutritious meals program. This program is designed to ensure that vulnerable population receive the right amount of nutritious meals. By using data to optimize the distribution of meals, Bappenas and the UN Global Pools are improving the health outcome of the target population while also enhancing the program's efficiency and sustainability. This case study illustrates broader potential for integrating technology and data into Indonesia national development planning. Next. To close this speech, I would like to emphasize that the Ministry of National Development Planning, or Bappenas, remains strongly committed to building an ecosystem that supports evidence, informed policymaking at all levels. This includes deepening collaboration with strategic partners such as BRIN, university, and local governments, which are the key actors in producing high-quality policy research and planning. Looking ahead, Bappenas invite broader collaboration in future government work plan cycles, especially in priority areas such as energy transition, education reform, and food security. Bappenas also welcome meaningful capacity building effort and insight from partners to help scale innovation and strengthen Indonesia overall development agenda. Thank you. That's all. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Pak Uke, atas penjelasannya. Thank you for your presentation. That is a whole lot of advancement, yeah, from the first time that our government mandate evidence-based policy making in local and national governance practice. However, since almost 15 years ago, since the determinations of Law Number 12 of 2011 that requires the inclusion of academic studies for scientific justification, yeah, in drafting legislation. However, Bappenas have safeguarded the policymaking process in national development planning through series of extensive efforts. And some of the key points I have to highlight from Pak Uke's explanations is particularly the four pillars of transformative approach that are data collection, strategic partnerships, adaptive learning, and predictive analysis using machine learning, AI analytics, and so on. That is very insightful, Pak Uke. Thank you, sir, for your explanation. Now, let's move into our last speaker, but it will be very, very valuable for us to learn from her. Professor Hurriyat Bapachan, a respected scholar from James Cook University, Australia. She has a distinguished career over the last 25 years with proven track record of achievement, not only as scholars and authors, but also in senior leadership and strategic management roles. She has held multiple senior roles in higher education, public administration, and research and training, such as Pro Vice Chancellor, Academic and Research, Dean, Head of School, and Director of Research Institutes. Talking about her achievement and award will be one full day, but to give you a glimpse of the awards she has received, for example, Order of Australia in 2014 for outstanding contribution for furthering multicultural community education and social policy development, Bicentenary Medal awarded by the Prime Minister in 2002. She was also the Queensland State finalist in the Telstra Businesswomen's Award in Community and Public Service category in 2003. And her name has been listed in the Australian Women's Archives as recognition of women leaders who have contributed to Australia development. So without further ado, Professor Hurriyat, are you ready to present your topic? Okay, time is yours,
Thank you
Professor.
very much. Can you see my slides?
Yes, it's clear, Prof.
Pak Agus Eko Nugroho, Chairman, Ibu Yanti, as I like to call Ibu Yanuar Wismayati, my fellow panelists, our host, Pak Andri, ladies and gentlemen, what an honor to be here. I'm a visiting professor with the Center for Behavioral Economics and Circular Economy, so I'm very thrilled at that. So I have been in BRIN. I feel like I'm part of BRIN, and I feel like I'm part of Pak Agus's staff member. So I am not a stranger to you. Also, I'm going to be talking today both from a researcher perspective and a policymaker perspective. I have held senior roles in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. I have held senior roles in what we call state governments, which are like your provincial governments. I've also have been a CEO of a major local government area with about 600 staff, so covering the size of UK. So I have had experience of government and making and leading whole of government policies from an Australian perspective, but also I've been a researcher working with governments. So I'm going to come at it from both angles, and also just to talk a little bit about, changing directions and what's happening in Australia, which I think is part of a global trend, and you will also start to experience, if not already, in Indonesia. So thank you very much for the invitation to speak today. So I just want to show you a comment from our public service senior executive comment saying that our system relies not only on market mechanisms, but on also trust. And trust is at the heart of everything we do in public policy and government. And they're there to serve the public good. But this trust is predicated on good evidence and good public engagement, which both Pak Uke and previous Pak Azwa has also touched upon. Just also some quick overview about where Australia sits in the policy and science scene. In the Government Effectiveness Index, we rank about 93.8, so we're not 100%, although it's a higher score. In the OECD Public Trust Survey of people, the public trust in government, we're not doing so good. We're 46% of the population surveyed said that they trust the government. So that trust has been slipping. Also, the trust in science, which in Australia is also slipping. We're at 3.91. In that Colonia study of 68, we're in 5th position. But I think if they did some studies today, it would even be lower. So we're slipping on public trust for our institutions, and we're slipping on the thing called trust in science, because there's something called dark enlightenment happening. There's a global trend around reverse enlightenment and questioning science and academia. So the government policy process, as a little recap, is the policy process is really what the government's going to do. What is its implementation? What are its policy instruments? And how are we going to execute what government says it's going to do? I think we also need to differentiate between policymakers and the politicians. They're interconnected but separate, and I think that's a point we researchers often miss. The policymakers are not necessarily in the politics. They're also not politicians. Sometimes they stay there a lot longer than the politicians do. The policy process is dynamic, and I have one of the drawings there. There are multiple characteristics. It's not linear, it's cyclical, it comes around, goes around. But over the years, what we're seeing is two things: more evidence and ensuring buy-in. Ensuring buy-in from civil society and building civic engagement. I was involved as a senior public service with the United Nations and Queensland government at looking at how do societies engage with government. So we had a community engagement strategy for whole of government, which I was part of developing and leading and implementing. A lot of our challenges in policy are major societal challenges. Some of them are at crisis points. We're dealing with complexity. We're dealing with different interests and segments and lobby groups. And we're making difficult trade-offs in balancing the competing interests and also different value sets. It's playing itself out all the time in society. Some of it's in the media, some of it's in the government, some of it's in our parliaments, and some of it is quite hidden. So I think it's important to understand that the researchers are coming into this complexity of government making. When I say policy, please think of also regulation, please think of legislation. It's a broader than just a narrow policy statement. In Australia, we have different aspects. We have strategic direction documents, we have annual work plans, we have legislation and regulation. So it's a complex number of processes. Over the years, we are shifting towards this notion of engagement. And this is where both public evidence-based approach, but also more strongly around engagement becomes very fundamental. This Australian Public Service, the national government has developed a guide to engagement in the public sector. Trust, they say, is our reform currency. So if we're trying to get any reform, we have to build that trust. And building the policy trust comes from a policy guidance and engagement. 4 aspects of it. We have to share and consult, we have to deliberate, and we have to collaborate. This is not mandated, but it is encouraged. So all of our policy processes go through a continuum of a minimum of sharing to a high level of collaboration. So the standard way of doing policy in Australia has been just share and consult. Now, I brought one of the first policies, whole of government policies on gender to the Queensland government. And when I was doing that, the Premier, who's like the head of the government, the politician, and the Deputy Director General, and I, we went out and shared what our vision was and to consult. But the Premier of the time did not want to bring gender as a policy platform. He said, we've done gender, we're all gendered out. But I used to go to both Indo-Pacific forums representing the Queensland government as the most senior person, and also the Australasian ministerial councils. And Queensland was the only place that did not have a gender policy. So the part of the way we got gender policy, the first one in Queensland, led by me, all government, it was binding on all of the 23 government departments, was through what we call deliberate and collaborate. Deliberate is we deliberated with the scientists, we got the research around the state of gender, we got the challenge areas. Also, we engaged with the not-for-profit sector, we engaged with women's group, we engaged with men groups, because there's different knowledge that rests there. It's not the science as we know it as academic science, but it's another form of knowledge. Capturing those was very important in the deliberate process. So we deliberated with those, we collaborated with researchers, industry people, and basically the outcome was very transformative, as Pak Uge was saying. And it offered pathways forward. We identified very, very complex problems. For example, maternity leave. Industry did not want to come to the table. It was another cost to them to provide women maternity leave when they became pregnant. But Australia's got a declining population. So if we're wanting to keep up our population, then it's important we support women into the workforce as well as supporting women into the motherhood. So that was like one example of the kinds of complexity we were dealing with. We were looking at adaptive thinking. We're looking at balance of values. Many people thought, why do we need a gender policy, women's policy? Different interests and priorities and shared actions built on trust. It took me 9 months to do this process. Also, the Premier said to Muriat, I will let you have a women's or a gender policy if all of the Directors General of every government department signs off on it. So I had to get a sign off from every government head, plus all of the female parliamentarians in his party, which made up cabinet. It took me 9 months to get there, but I got it using evidence-based approaches. So it's a complex and not an easy process, but it has, most often we just do share and consult, but if we do deliberate and collaborate, we get different kind of outcome. And if we're thinking about the future of our society and our civil society, then we really need to go those next 2 steps. Now, let me turn to the research side. Research is an individual process most often. Yes, Brim, you have teams, but at the end of the day, it's my research, it's my career, particularly in academia, particularly in universities. We also want the research to be independent. We don't want it to be too ingrained in government. Research is not neutral. Every research has a value base, can I say? But it's independent. So let's not get the value base confused with its independence. If you're researching, for example, disadvantage, you're saying something about society. If you're researching climate change, you're saying something about belief in climate. So none of it is value-free, but it's neutral, it's independent. So we do that research separate from policy and government. And also often the world of the researcher is not the world of the public policy servant. I'm a public policy servant. I also have master's degrees in public policy. So I also studied public policy for many years. So there's a disjuncture between the world of the policymakers and the world of the researchers. And often different kinds of technical languages are used. The languages of research does not always comfortably speak to the language of the policy and vice versa. Over the years, the last 2 decades, there has been a call of evidence-based policy in Australia. There's also been a walking away from this. So we are getting 2 streams of action. Our innovation and science industry, DSER, basically believes and argued that knowledge should be shared. And they actually commissioned me with the chief scientists across Australia to look at what knowledge communication looks like. So I actually did a paper for the Australian government of how science and knowledge should be communicated through major stakeholder consultations with key research and industry and government agencies. So researchers are increasingly expected to make their research available beyond the research community. This is now well established in Australia. You do not just do your research and publish your article and sit back. Absolutely not acceptable. And the shift is getting more, which I'm going to show you in a minute. There has been numerous calls which started possibly with the Cabinet Office in UK for how this policy can be made using evidence base. However, in the context of Australia, we have numerous challenges, and I'm going to talk about those in a minute, but also we have good data collection systems. We have a national census every 5 years. We have the Australian Bureau of Statistics, which is like your BAPANAS and Government Statistics Office. But a number of the niche areas that add specific data have been defunded. So we don't have immediate or longitudinal data over the years in quite difficult areas. So we have a blueprint company that looks at how is evidence making working in Australia. For example, in 2018 to 21, they looked at 72 bills and regulations and policies and found that, for example, only 8 had used a cost-benefit analysis and a significant evidence-based integration. So that's a big statistic. So while governments attempt to do evidence-based, we're not good at it in Australia. We're also getting a lot of noises about why evidence-based policymaking isn't working. So the benefits of evidence-based policymaking, and I'm summarizing a lot of literature and I'm summarizing a lot of discourse here. I have the details if you need. I have a whole reference list. I'm rushing because there's a lot to get through. But evidence-based policy in Australia has been things like it uncovers policy gaps. It increases policy effectiveness through identifying what works in policy and practice. It provides evidence for right types of policy interventions. It avoids unforeseen consequences of policy, because policy can also do damage. It enables cost effectiveness and better public resource use. It enables transparency of governments and accountability, and it encourages cross-sector collaboration through researchers and different bits of evidence coming together. But on the flip side, there's been a lot of criticisms of evidence-based planning in Australia, and some senior policymakers are walking away from it at all 3 levels of government. Over-reliance on particular types of research. So people are critical on the types of research, particularly random choice, controlled type studies have been criticised for the lack of breadth and the population groups it can cover. Also, lack of clarity of what does evidence mean? How do we constitute evidence? And this was brought up by Pak Azwar in the Indonesian situation. We use different terminologies. Evidence-based pushes us towards more technocratic policy making and more managerialism. Also, stretchability of data. So if I want a gender policy, I go cherry picking for the evidence I want. Not all of the evidence, but the ones that's going to support what I want as a public servant. Lack of framework and skills in public service to integrate integrate the different diverse data sources and the different types of evidence. We can use one source but not the other. Also, focusing on what works approach, because a lot of the evidence-based planning works on what does work, what's going to be good, focuses less on the causal, how will it work and why will it work. So, and also what works in one place or one policy, it's not clear from the evidence base of how it can be replicated. So these are some of the criticisms in the Australian context about the benefits and the lack of benefits of using evidence-based in policy making. So is there a policy and academic interface? And when I say academic, I also include researchers in this, wherever they sit, whether they sit in universities or research institutions. So in Australia, we have had major influence on key big policy outcomes by researchers. For example, we have a universal healthcare system. So if you go to a doctor or a hospital, it's by and large free. We call that Medicare. It was initially called Medibank. Medibank became a private insurance. We still have Medicare. But the work of that was done by two academics, John Deeble and Professor Scotto. And that has been with us for 30 years. They did the core work and advised government on what should a universal healthcare policy look like. We have a big immigration policy, as many of you would know. 46% of the population is born overseas or the child of someone born overseas. And what does immigration look like to our country was led by an academic called Jerzy Zabriskie, and he was a professor of sociology at ANU. So we have had major influence in, I can give lots of examples of the policy and academic interface. But we've eventually also had researchers become senior policy people. For example, John Hewson, who was a public servant, later on became the leader of the opposition and ran for the prime ministership of the country. But many of our senior government leaders, and including myself, are academics and researchers. So there's that policy academic interface ongoing, happening in different ways. But for researchers, it's very difficult to engage. So research from Australia highlights the challenges and persistent barriers of effective collaboration and translation of research into policy. For example, we have difficulty engaging end users. Many of us don't even think who's going to read our research in the Australian context. Or if end users are hard to reach. Or it's not in our mindset. We have high-end elite researchers. And when I started academia as a very applied researcher, I remember my head of school telling me I will never make it to professors with this attitude because I was engaging too much. They wanted me to be a high elite researcher. And I want to be an elite researcher. I want to do good research, but I also want my research to make an impact. So some of the language that we're using now is going from end user to partner in research. So we are having big shifts in Australia about researchers having to think about what is the end product of our research. And it first starts with who are we going on this journey, even if it's for a small research project. We're also not allowed now, we can get away less with just going in and interviewing and surveying and collecting data extraction. We have to give something back. So that data extraction and data collection has to be more mindful and engaged. Also, our research systems have not until recently taken account of, what is our performance measures as researchers? Is it 5 publications in a high-rated journal, or is it policy influence? Are we mentioned in key social media as influencing something? So we're also shifting on that. We're shifting away from that only high-ranking elite performance indicators to more engaged. Also, researchers are often researching sensitive issues. We're in political environments. Our past governments did not allow us to talk about climate change, for example. This government wants to talk nothing but climate change. So researchers are in these sensitive topic domains, and there's different perception of the risk in the areas that we're researching, whether it's circular economy, whether it's health outcomes, whether it's economic diversification. So we are navigating those areas without a lot of guidance around this. And it was driven home to me. For example, I've looked at things around disasters and domestic violence, and in Australia, domestic violence research is well established, or disability research is well established. When I went overseas to collaborate with others, they said they had to get permission from government to look at these areas of disability and domestic violence, which to us seems normal to research, but in other contexts, very sensitive. Differences in time frames, differences in goals, what is a researcher and our research institutions are trying to achieve and what governments are trying to achieve are very different. And also, research findings are often inaccessible to policymakers and broader civil society actors. And also lack of training to researchers about how to really effectively communicate and engage with policy and civil society stakeholders. So as you can see, the researchers are also in a institutional frameworks that bind them, but also their own personal mindsets and skill sets. Also, when we're doing research, we've got short time frames. Most of us are doing maximum 2-3 years, sometimes 1 year, but it takes time to build that trust with the policymakers. It takes time for them to get to know your work and those relationships. So it's very difficult within the project timeframes. Also, researchers, once they've done the research, it's very hard to identify whether they've influenced anything. They don't really know. They might publish, or sometimes they do policy papers and discussion papers, but we often don't know, have we really achieved anything? Have we really influenced anything? So it becomes a cycle of not engaging when you don't know. Sustained engagement also takes times, and timeframes don't, as I've mentioned. Also, sometimes when we do go out to end users, the feedback is conflicting or ambiguous. So we don't know what to do with that then. The insights around our findings, etc., we take it out, but then we don't know how to engage with that. So it requires careful interpretation, and methodologically, we need to look at how can we still keep our rigor, but allow the methodologies to engage so that we're getting that positive and relevant feedback. And also sometimes it's sensitive about who owns the research, intellectual property right, and collaboration challenges, particularly when we've got research that's commercialized. So people are very protective of that and they don't want to take it out. In Australia, we started this notion of engaged scholarship, and I want to touch upon this. It's a collaborative form of research inquiry that involves researchers and non-research stakeholders, government and civil society organisations. It tries to bridge the gap between theory and practice by integrating rigorous research with meaningful and practical impact. So the focus is on impact of the research. But to me, it is about making a difference through our knowledge. It's cutting-edge solutions to societal problems. We stimulate creativity and innovation both in the researchers, but also those we're engaging with. We think, I have this motto, head, heart, and hand. Head is the thinking, heart is the passion and the values, and hand is the doing. It's the policy, it's the industry, it's the government. We build civic capacity and skills for research engagement. We have some values around human rights, around social justice. Most of our research has a human codes, ethic codes in Australia. And also starting from not where we want to research, but what the community, industry, and government needs. So flipping it backward about how do we develop research projects so that we can make that impact. So engaged scholarship is, if you Google this, you'll find a lot of academic literature on this. It's not a new concept, but it's coming back. But Engaged scholarship privileges the diversity of perspectives. I mentioned that there's different types of knowledge. So it's the theorists, it's the researchers, but it's also the practitioners, because thinking leads to doing, doing leads to thinking. So theory doesn't come from the air. Theory comes from doing and thinking. So for that reason, co-production of knowledge is pretty critical. It's about understanding the value that the knowledge we create to society. It's also recognizing and democratizing knowledge across civil society. But it's also getting buy-in. If you have a policymaker with you at the beginning of the research, your research is going to go to places. It's emphasizing real-world impact, not just any impact, but really, how is this going to work? It makes you think about that, and you go beyond traditional dissemination, such as publications or conference papers. It also enables you to really get into the deep depth of wicked problems and complex issues. And these require more sophisticated, both research partnerships, but also different stakeholder partnerships. And by doing this, we cross boundaries, we cross sectors, and we're multidisciplinary and multi-professional. And overall, it then contributes to civic development so that your protesters that we had in the example can understand the value that knowledge brings. So what are the drivers of knowledge? I commend this Molla who writes in the context of Australia. She's a really great academic. She's got current publications, but she's basically saying we have to do engaged scholarship for two reasons. One is because of paradigms, that we have theories and theoretical orientations, that we have epistemological and methodological considerations, we have ethical responsibilities as researchers. But from a pragmatic perspective, we have crisis and urgent situations and shocks, whether it's climate change or disasters or economic or tariff wars. We have crises and urgencies. This urgency necessitates us to use knowledge differently, and we have a social contract. Our institutions, whether it's BRIN or university, is funded to deliver social responsibility and public good. So we have to then think about, well, what does the role of the researcher become? The role of the researcher is not then a passive person conducting research. It is active, engaged scholar. And you apply your professional knowledge, your professional insights and skills to tackle pressing social, cultural, and environmental challenges. But this requires us to have sustained partnerships with policymakers on a long-term basis, not just in a project. Role is not limited to knowledge production, but expands in becoming actors ourselves who participate effectively in creative intellectual activities. At the moment, I just want to give an example of how this is rolling out in Australia. Our federal and state governments have nationally rolled out a resilience, drought and climate resilience project. They want that to be an academically resilient project. In the state of Queensland, there are 14 regions. They've come to us. I'm part of Rural Economy Centre of Excellence. We're 4 universities, and 4 universities are leading drought and climate resilience research across a big area. It's a large state compared to other states in Australia. Brisbane is its capital. So we have been leading this work, research, with 77 councils, which is all the local government. We have the state and federal government at the table. And what we've done is we've gone out and did rigorous research of what is it going to take to be resilient to climate and drought events in the state of Queensland. But then we involve the local governments as our hosts. So the universities are not hosts, the local government. So far, we have consulted over 10,000 people in these plans. But then the plans, we submitted the plans to CSIRO, which is our science organisation like BRIN. So they have reviewed these plans and made inputs. So academic rigour is upheld and the research is upheld, but then The second part of the plans is how do we then turn this into action? That's where our Commonwealth, state, local, and other industry partners have come. These plans then go to the federal minister and the state minister for sign off, and then they're adopted, and then implementation. It's a 2.5-year process. And once they get to implementation, the federal and state government haven't let go of the role of the universities. They want us to work with the implementers to implement these plans. So we are now giving funding to have that research oversight on the implementation. So you can see that the implementation and the role of the researcher is changing. In the past, we would have just done the research, given it to government, then the government would have tried to do something with it. In this stage, we're involved as researchers in every stage of the project, from the conceptualization and the funding process to beyond the implementation. One of my favorite authors is Edward Said. I don't know if any of you have come across him. He's quite an old academic, but he said, what is a true intellectual? An intellectual, a researcher, is a member of society who is thinking and who is concerned, and is entitled to raise moral issues even at the heart of most technical and professionalized activity. And as researchers, we're at the heart of professionalized and technical activity. So it requires us to be really engaged in a passionate way with our stakeholders. Yes, we're vulnerable in some ways when we're doing research, and we may or may not be permitted, but we can bring our organizations into it and work through our organizations. It's not an individual journey. So that is a concept that's emerging. Can I also just quickly touch upon something called research impact that is coming in a big way in Australia? So we have something called excellence in research. How do we define excellence in research? In the past, it used to be high-level research funding and only high-level publications. This has been pretty much abandoned. We don't do that anymore. We're moving on to a new era of looking at what is research impact in Australia. And what that entails is looking at how have we made an impact to economy, society, culture, public policy, health, services, environment, and our contribution through our research beyond that academic contribution. So this is coming in a big way globally. I think we need to gear up for this. It requires an institutional shift. It requires researchers to behave and think and develop methodologies differently. It's about really engaging with the real world change. So it requires us to be inclusive, collaborative, transformative in the way we engage research and research partners. Also, we're starting to look at how we measure this, because it's not easy to measure. How have we made a difference in policy? In some of mine, I've got, policy researchers have quoted me in policy documents or in the social media. But is that enough? And you don't get that all the time. So, for example, in 28 case studies were undertaken of policy and research projects in Australia as a way to look at how we might measure policy impacts. But what we came up with is those problems that I mentioned at the beginning. Researchers don't know what impact they've made. They haven't engaged effectively. They need training in engagement and making an impact, but also demonstrating how we made that impact. So recommendation from this major study was we need better impact frameworks. We need funding impact outcomes, and we need not just publications and outputs, but impact measures that measures what we're being pushed and, the policy framework is going to. So impact-driven policy is the new language here. It translates into policies, strategies, service improvements, program changes, regulation changes. It's about integrating research goals. It's about looking at our communication. It's about relationships. And there are different models, pathway to impact logic, generative models. There's some references there. This is a new field emerging. Everyone's struggling with this at the moment, but this is where we're heading in Australia. And I suspect not before long, you will also find this. Now, I want to show you an example of this. All of you are familiar with Connexi, right? You know the Connexi funding. So what is Connexi doing? It's looking at impact-driven research for policy. So there's a call out that just closed last week. This reflects Australian government thinking. And what they want is policy uptake in the research they have funded in Indonesia. So what they're looking at is to increase the use of knowledge and research for inclusive and sustainable policies, but how have these been used by governments in the context of socioeconomic problems? The ultimate goal of research investment, which is what Connexi is knowledge generated to make a difference to policymakers, industry, and community. So it's coming to Indonesia way already, and this is an example. And they have set up something called stakeholder engagement and research impact framework. Please look at this if you're not familiar with it. There is a framework that's going to guide how we do impact measurements. And I just want to show you what they think. For example, this is an example of what it might look like. One, at lowest level, it's about awareness. So do policymakers know about your research and your outputs? Have they downloaded your pages and looked at it? Have you been mentioned in the media? So then it moves to influence. How have your research influence? Thinking, the broad debates on the topic, but also policy. Media mentions, reporter inquiries, journal citations, academic presentations, collaborations or partnerships with policy makers around those issues, awards and public recognition. And then the last one, this is what they're aiming for, that the policymakers or end users mention you, they use your work, you have policy briefings and policy citation documents. That's just to show an example of how they're looking to look at how we do impact with policy. So it goes beyond evidence use, it goes beyond what we've had to date. And the world is heading in this direction. Australia is really pushing for this at the moment. UK's already gone down this path, USA's gone, Canada's gone, some of Europe is gone, OECD is picking it up, World Bank's looking at it. So I think it's going to filter down through the ASEAN region, and I know there are conversations already happening in this. So what does this mean? I'm just finishing up. We need to really look at the way we do research. We need to do our stakeholder analysis much more carefully. We need to look at engagement more seriously, not just for data extraction. We need early co-design with our stakeholders. We need adaptable frameworks in the way we do research. We need to form relationships, not just try to get the evidence. We need to be politically aware of the key challenges, of the key crises, and the political and the public sector landscapes that change. Pak Azwar already talked about how the policy framework changed in Indonesia over the years from military to other. So we really need to be mindful of that. We need to make sure our research syncs with other agendas of the government. We need to communicate these. We need to build researcher skills, tools, and resources for research impact and evidence base. And we need to change our institutions. Our institutions really need to start rewarding researchers for impact if we're going to be able to get the research funding, etc., that we require. And so I have several pages of publications and other resources I've used. Thank you very much for listening to me. It was a lot to pack in, but my key message is public sector is engaging, consulting, but not the traditional way, deliberating and more transformative engagement. Research conversations are change the researcher behavior towards engaged scholarship. And 3 is that the impact of research demonstration is going to be more geared towards practice and applied outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hurriyat. Very, very insightful presentation. And there are a lot, that we can reflect from Professor Hurriyat's explanations. The one point, for example, is we have to shift from traditional mindset, which is share and consult, to deliberate and collaborate as a researcher in the policymaking process. And also, it is interesting to note that evidence-based policy, while the humongous benefit is undeniable, it's still not without criticism. For example, like over reliance of particular research site, lack of clarity of what constitutes evidence, policy as technocratic without context, and so on and so forth. And also, it is also exciting the insight that Professor Hurriyet gave us. For example, in regarding the policy uptake of research. From the presentation, it seems like it's so much works, but I guess that is what it's all about, yeah, in making impacts from our policy research. That's what is an active engagement. So researcher is not just sitting behind the desk, writing, compiling references and data, but we also need to actively engage in policy setting with the policymakers, with the stakeholders, so we can involve in the whole process of policy making, designing the research, and offer the insight from our research. So that will provide us a lot of lesson today. Now, after amazing explanations from three speakers, now we will have a question and answer session. We already compiled quite a lot of questions, and I will invite audiences for the questions. Okay, I will invite Miss Mesalina Salampesi from Universitas Nusa Bangsa. Are you here with us, Miss Mesalina? Okay, Miss Mesalina, are you joining with us in Zoom? No? Okay, then.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you, Miss
Okay.
Mesalina. Please introduce yourself briefly and then mention your question.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Andri, for opportunity for me. And I have two questions, but for first to Mr. Aswar, yeah, Mr. Aswar, and
Yeah.
sorry, I forget Mr.
Uke, Mr. Uke.
Oh yeah, Mr. Uke. Okay. For various policies that have been made, especially from research result, it's very necessary to be able to implement them. Are there any indicator that can be used to monitor the implementation of this policy? Thank you. And I have one question for Prof. Hurriyet. Thank you for the amazing knowledge for me. Relate to the research process, if the for research is conducted by individual like me and does not have a role in a policymaker and is a criticism, how can the policy be effective in getting the attention of policymaker for implementation? Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Mr. Andre.
Okay, thank you, Bu Mesalina. So the first question will be for Pak Azwar and Pak Uke regarding from research result, it is very necessary to be able to implement them. Are there any indicators that can be used to monitor the implementation of these policies that is based from the research? And the second question will be for Professor Hurriyet, asking about if the researcher is an individual and does not have a role in policy making, and the research is actually a criticism for the policymakers. So how can it be effective in getting the attention of policymakers so it will be implemented? For Pak Azwar, you can answer first. Azwar masih di mute mic-nya. Masih di mute Pak Azwar.
All right.
Oke.
Thank you, Ibu Mesalina. I think the question is about the indicators that can be used to monitor the implementation. So I think we can use George C. Edwards III policy implementation model to understand how effectively policies are put into practice. The model is highlights 4 key factors that influence the success of implementation. First is communication, second is houses, third disposition, and fourth is bureaucratic structure. So we can ask a short question from 4 key indicators. First, communication. You can ask, is the policy clearly communicated to those who must implement it? And the second one, resources. You can ask the question, do implementers have enough resources, money, staff, equipment, etc.? And the third, dispositions or attitudes. You can ask questions, do implementers support the policy and are they motivated to carry it out? And the last one is bureaucratic structure. Is the organization structured well to implement the policy effectively? I think we can use the 4 key indicators to monitor the implementation of policies, and I think it is universal for applied either in central government or local government. Thank you, Mr. Andre.
Okay, thank you, Pak Azwar, for your answer. Now, Pak Uke, would you like to? Yeah.
Mesalina, of course, in government annual planning, we already set some indicator. We have what we call macro development indicator. I believe there are 6 indicators. First, economic growth. Second, unemployment rate. The third, poverty rate. The fourth, human capital index. 5, emission rate. And 6, ratio. The 6 indicator came from very long discussion what we should take as impact indicator in our development. And also we set the target. When we set the target, it's based on research and also modeling and input from many stakeholders. And we also communicate. By the way, thank you, Professor Babachan. I do agree with your presentation that share and consult is a traditional way, and we should reform to deliberate and collaboration. It is in line with our ministry policy that we, since I believe 2010, our minister assigned senior officer as a liaison officer to bridging communicate with Bappenas, central government and local government, especially in provincial level. So we communicate the target of the 6 indicator, macro indicator, with the local government. We have intense discussion, and finally we have to agree target and set on RPJM, on the national level and also in the provincial level and municipal and district level. I believe what your question is already done within the government process. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Uke. I guess I agree with Pak Uke's explanation. The government, especially Bappenas, always requires a set of monitoring indicators, ya Pak. Whenever institutions propose a programs or policies or strategic plan, Bappenas always requires what is the measurable indicators that can be used to monitor each of the programs. I guess we can look into every institution's website or Satu Data. I guess that will be helpful, yeah, to see the monitoring system. So now to Professor Hurriyat, the question to you, Prof.
Thank you. That was a very important question. So the question is, what do you do when you're not a policymaker and you're criticizing government?
Yes.
Criticism is not a bad thing. So we often avoid conflict, but it's a question of, one, how do you build a relationship? So as a researcher from a very young age, I've nurtured my relationships with public sector and other stakeholders, even when I disagree with them. We can have disagreements, but first of all is to try and establish those connectivities so that you can talk about the issues. The second is continue the same message, but in a constructive way. And, sometimes that's possible. Sometimes we have to come out and hit it hard on the head. For example, if you look at our scientists around the world now with the global warming, we're not getting traction from governments. So what are they doing? They're making a bigger noise. So there's inward way and an outward way to make the noise. It depends where you are. Universities are freer. Research organizations are not that always free. So it depends on where you're located about how are you able to get that critical thinking. So you're not criticizing, you're critical thinking, you're adding knowledge. You're not making conflict because for its own sake or for your vested interest. What you're doing is you're seeing a public good and you think there's some issue or something's not being addressed, there's a gap or it's being done the wrong way, it's not getting attention. So what you're trying to do is get attention to the issue. Now, the policy space, we call it the crowded space. Everyone is trying to get attention, from big lobbyists, big powerful players, to the little person who doesn't have power but has a policy issue. So we're competing on a domain with everybody else in society to get policy attention. So how do researchers get that? You get that through building trust, through constructive criticism, but also building the narrative. So when we look at what happened in Australia around climate change, for decades, the government was conservative and didn't believe climate science. So absolutely did not take the researchers into account, said there's no such thing as climate change. We've just had elections. In fact, the conservative new leader is also saying that. He doesn't believe there's climate change. So basically, it's important, but we have had adoption of climate change, but as researchers, what we did is, well, what's acceptable to government? That's what I said. Researchers have to be really aware of our environment. What's the political context? What's the public policy context? What's the broader stakeholder context? And really dovetail our research to that. In the climate resilience project that I just gave you an example, I can give a lot of examples. We called it drought because government didn't want to talk about climate. They were very pro-farmer, pro-agriculture. And what do agricultural community get affected by? Drought. So that's how the policy but it's basically dealing with the same science. We looked at rainfall, we looked at disasters, we looked at biodiversity loss, we looked at global temperature. So in the end, you can get it through different ways. Also look for collaborators outside of the research community. So you build a consortium of agencies who can say the same thing. It could be other researchers, it could be empathetic policymakers, and it's also other stakeholders that can make a bigger noise. And the final comment I'll say is watch how you communicate. So you try and build that relationship, but if you haven't got the relationship, it's not good. It's not very helpful, I don't find, if you just go out and criticize. Your organization will pull you in. You'll jeopardize your funding. Government won't talk to you again. But find constructive ways of communicating the message. That may be smaller scale, that may be different ways of coming at it. That communication is also important. So constructive criticism can take place, but sometimes we get to our end point and we know the issues are urgent, and that's the last resort when we go public and not very constructive criticism. So there's some strategies I've used over my lifetime. I have found it successful most of the time. Of course, there's been hard issues where sometimes it hasn't worked, and that's where you resort to consortiums and coalition building for the evidence.
Okay. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you,
So,
Prof.
yeah, I guess all the answer is clear, ya, Bu Masalina. Now we move on to the second question. Pak Basel or Ibu Basel, please, are you with us?
Thank you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thanks for the opportunity, Mr. Andre or Mas Andre. Before that, let me introduce myself. My name is Samara Fandi, or you can call me Fandi. Currently, I'm working as the head of the research and development of Bapelitbangda, Bangka Selatan Regency or Sub-Bangka Regency, exactly in Bangka Belitung province. Thank you. I want to greet to all the speakers. Thanks for the insightful presentation today. It's so very useful for us, especially from the regional, from the Regency, I mean. Today I have some questions, especially about to the all speakers, and as well as responses. First of all, I want to direct my questions to Mr. Azwar from the Research Center for Public Policy of BRIN. I've seen the presentations. It's interesting presentation. However, I want to ask questions about the respondent. Actually, what kinds of respondents you took for your research? Because in real life, especially happening in Regency, I found that it's not representative, maybe, in terms of the coverage, because about the focusing about the perspective with the some parables, I mean, the points, we find that the research finding stated that dominantly policy researchers work closely with the politicians, become the largest number that you find in your researches. But today, in real life, we haven't found that because it is proven by the commitment of the politicians. In this case, the region maybe, and also the House of Representatives in our Regency, specifically who given the low budget about the research and development budget. I think that's one of the concerns or the focus of this point is I think that this is not relevant to our urgency. Maybe that's the first. The secondly, I want to ask questions to Mr. Uke from Bapenas. It's also insightful presentation, Pak. Thank you. I want to ask about the also. I believe that the policy research is effective, given the effective benefit for society. I looked the presentations about the adoptions of the free meal, the implementations of free meal research. I think if I have not mistaken, who have been established by Bapenas with the UN. I think it's like contrastive reality. We still find that now in the news that we find that the food that will be given to children is not good or is not proper. It's not appropriate because the food is already, it's not good to be consumed by children. I want to ask how you responded, because I think that I believe the research should give the benefit or should give effective solution for society. Last but not least, I want to respond to the presentation that has been presented by Professor Hurayat is insightful also. Basically, the two previous questions is, I think, it's reflected by the points that you delivered, that you have delivered before, because it's form of the criticism of the EBP, evidence-based policy. Professor, I think it's not in the future. I think it's because it's a really insightful materials. I think in the future, hopefully I'll become one of your students, maybe in Australia. Hopefully, because I think I'm really concerned. I'll be focused about the public policy. Thank you. Maybe that's all my question.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Basel, for your
Thanks.
question.
Thanks, Mas Andri, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Pak Basel.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
you have prospective student, Professor Hurriyat. He is interested in being your student in the Australia. Okay, now,
Thank you, Mas Andri. Okay.
yeah, thank you, Pak Basel. So, Professor Hurriyat and Pak Uke, you can answer the question directly.
I think it was more a comment than a question to me, basically about based policy, that it's not all positive. It's there's some critiques of it. And I think that's true with everything in life, isn't it? There's the pluses and the minuses. And how well we use evidence and, it's always, any data and any evidence is subject to human interpretation, and now AI interpretation, of course, artificial intelligence. So I think the context is more important in the way we use data. So what is the context? Is it policy? Is it the politics? Is it the politicians? What's the issue at hand and how complex it is? So given those considerations, evidence is always needed. It's not that we're ever going to be without any evidence. Even before evidence-based policy came into our jargon as our use, as in our nomenclature, we always used evidence anyway in policy. But basically, it's about being mindful of its shortcomings and also understanding that there's a lot of different types of knowledge. Now, in Australia, we are now beginning to recognise Indigenous knowledge, First Nations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledge that is 60,000 years old. And some of our Western science, what we're calling science, is now uncovering through scientific methods what they knew long ago. So we're now having multiple systems of knowledge, and Australia's moving towards recognizing what we call traditional knowledges. So all of that is important in the evidence-based policy process, and there is part of its shortcomings as well. Thank you. And I look forward to seeing, I put my contacts if you want a conversation about further
Yeah,
offline.
Professor, several audiences ask me about your email contact. Can I give them your email contact?
Yes, you can. I put it in the chat. My
Okay,
email and my WhatsApp number is in the chat. I also put my presentation in the chat. So
excellent. Thank you so much, Professor. Okay, now we move on to the next question. It is from Kak Ernest. The question from Kak Ernest will be appropriate for
Andri,
Pak
sorry.
Uke. Yeah,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
I have not answered the
Oh yeah,
question
Pak
of
Uke.
Fandi.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Please, please.
Thank you, Pak Fandi, for your question. Is regarding nutrition free meal ya, atau in bahasa MBG makan bergizi gratis. First, MBG program is developed to respond to the fact of the very higher rate of stunting happening in Indonesia. So it is considered very urgent to to make or to develop program immediately to anticipate the fact that we have a very high rate of stunting. That's the first. And the second, MBG also will generate very high demand or economic activity in rural area. Therefore, because Indonesia is an agriculture country, the most populated, poverty populated is in rural area. It also expected that MBG could affect the poverty alleviation in rural area. That the second and the third, the bad condition, what happened, like written in the news, it should be monitored. Should be monitored.
Mungkin DL mungkin lah, DL.
Bocor.
Ngapain? Continue, Pak.
Yeah, thank you. In policy making, it's usual that we collect what we call negative feedback. So what happened in bad condition, food in bad condition given to the children, we should collect the information and the data, and we should study it, what happened in the field. It's related to the quality of the sources of the food, the vegetable, the egg, the meal, or it is related to the business process or management matters. And it should be developed improvement so the quality of the food could be improved. So what happened, we emphasize that we should collect the information and make some assessment to improve. And finally, in a general, the MBG program is still considered quite success until now because the program is just begun. So we still have time to collect, to monitor, to collect data and improve. And eventually, it's expected that what it said in the beginning could be achieved. Poverty alleviation and the improvement of our human resource in the future. I hope that's answered the question, Mr. Pandi. Thank you, Mr. Andre.
Thank you, Pak Uke, for your answer. Now we move on to the next question. The next question is from Kak Ernest. And I guess the question is appropriate for Pak Uke. So he or she asked about how to implement the research recommendation from BRIDA to be used in the preparation of planning documents in Bapeda sustainably. Because in reality, in the regions, this has not been going well. Each institutions in regional level still running alone on their respective task. What do you say, Pak Uke?
Thank you. As I mentioned before that I believe in since 2010, Bappenas has a policy to assign a senior officer to be a licensed officer to local government, bridging communication between local government and Bappenas. So it is not only guide local government, but also nurturing the planning process in Bapeda that usually the business process of developing planning process in the local government, that the local government technical unit, what we call OPD, usually they have study and communication with community stakeholder, and also BRIDA, supposed to be also with BRIDA. So the BRIDA, if has a study result, should be delivered to the technical unit and local government, and in their local development forum, it will be discussed with Bapeda whether the study result should be accommodate in development policy or should be improved, what the parameter indicator, what the target, it will be discussed, and if agreed, then put on the local government development planning. So if the BRIDA now have difficulties in submitting the result to the local government, they also can submit to us, to Bappenas. In Bappenas, they are deputy for regional development. Under the deputy of regional development, they are directorate for western part of Indonesia development, and they are the eastern part of Indonesia development. So BRIDA or researcher, any researcher, if they have a study result and want to share or as an input to our policy, they can deliver the study either to local government or to us, to Bappenas, to directorate, respective directorate in Deputy of Regional Development. Thank you.
Okay, so basically researchers, academics, they can send it simultaneously ya, Pak Uke ya, either to the local government and to Bappenas, and I'm sure that Bappenas is always open for any policy recommendation.
I believe they're more than happy to have their study.
Yes, Pak Uke. We in the Research Center for Public Policy actually have done that. We compile our research results, our papers, either funded by BRIN or funded by other institutions. We compile them into one document, and then we send them to one of the centers for policy analysis in Bappenas, and we are very welcome to send the research.
Excellent. Thank you, Pak.
Thank you, Pak Uke. Now we get to the next question from Kak Ana, a policy analyst from LAN, State Administrative Agency. Kak Ana, are you with us, or should I read the question here? Okay, so the question is, implementing evidence-based policy continues to face challenges today, especially after political events such as presidential or regional head elections. Many programs that emerge tend to aim at gaining public attention, making them more populist policies without proper studies. That's what we have right now. How can such populist policies can be transformed into genuinely necessary policies that address fundamental societal issues? Considering that campaign programs tend to focus more on public attention, while policies during the term of office should prioritize the urgency of specific programs. So, I guess Pak Uke and Prof. Hurriyet, would you like to take this question?
Thank you, Pak. For this situation, usually we we support, let's say, our national leader elected program in their campaign with the proper study, proper analysis, and sometimes if the target is very high, usually we offering cascading or staging to achieve what the leaders campaigns program. We can cascade the achievement and make sure that the program is implemented and achieved every stage or every cascade, every stage target set by the government. I hope it's answered the question.
Okay, thank you, Pak Uke. Prof. Hurriyet, you have a comment on this?
I don't know if I've understood the question correctly, but it's about when politicians make a promise and how does that become policy? Is that the question?
Yes. Yes.
So, as I always say, there is a separation. We call it the Westminster system, and Indonesia is governed by that. So you have the political arm, the mandate of the people, the democratic election, but they are like set strategic directions. The operational day-to-day running of the arms of government, whether it's the judiciary, the police and the military, and the public sector, have to be at an arm's length. Now, I know in very many countries, that's not the case because there's too much political interference. But I'll put that issue to one side. So there has to be a separation of powers between the different elements of government. So if a government comes on a particular agenda, it has the right to ask the public service to implement that. And sometimes, they get elected and they forget about it. Other times they come in and they don't resource it or give it the budget. Sometimes they get elected, but they don't have majority in government to pass the legislation. So a lot of circumstances happen around from the time of the promise to when it can be delivered. Assuming everything is going well, then the public sector's role is to then develop the policy options and the costings. A lot of the policy has to be financed. If something is getting financed, something else is not getting done. So in the competing priority of budget and policy, so it's about, senior advice. And it's also at this point where the researchers can really advise the government on what are some of the urgent and attention-seeking policy matters on that issue. If it's, poverty or malnutrition, or if it's access to health clinics in rural areas, or if it's disease control or access to work or participation. There could be many elements to this. So the public servant role is to give due advice to policymakers. Sometimes they don't get listened either. So that's also, policymakers may give the right advice and not be listened to. Other times there's good synergies and it happens. And sometimes the politicians and the public servants want to make it happen, but there's too many other constraints. And that's where the cascading happens. The financing challenges happen, or other emergencies take precedence. So I think it's not an easy or simple landscape to work through. But where the role of I come back to the role of the researcher. If something is urgent, we have a role in escalating it. We have a role in giving the evidence, in urging the issue, getting in front of the ministers, the stakeholders, and the policymakers to say, look, this is what we've uncovered, to guide and inform that process. We cannot force anyone to make policy. We cannot do any, we don't have the mandate. The mandate is with the elected representative and the public servant. Our role is to educate, but we can certainly have coalitions of science informing the process. Even if we're not listened to, we can find ways of being listened to, as I outlined earlier.
Thank you, Professor. Now, we still have one more question. It's from Kak Ratih. Are you with us? Do you want to explain the question yourself? I
Yes, Mr.
invite you.
Andre.
Okay. Please
Can
introduce yourself briefly, yeah.
okay, but I'm sorry I cannot open my video. Okay, appreciate to all the speaker. Thank you to all the insight. I have my own curiosity. It is it is interesting if Indonesia can make a policy based on public need, because it will be very impactful for the nation. Bapenas has done that on making RKP, but if I'm not mistaken, Bapak Uke, RKP is uh, make be 1 year before the implementation, right? So you have a great time to do that. My question is, what do you think of policies that are as responsive to any situation or any other national policy? The policy needs to be deregulated or regulated very soon. Even the public hearing is only a formality. So how can we make sure that the policy already fulfills the undang-undang mandat that is based on academic paper? And because nowadays the analysis is done after the policy is already ongoing process. So how do your opinions about that for the Professor Huriat and for Bapak Uka? Thank you.
Thank you, Kak Ratih. Please, Prof. Huriat and Pak Uke.
So we say policy is deliberative. So it's not done and dusted. If you look at transport policy, for example, go back 30 years, you'll see step by increment changes. Sometimes there's big transformative changes, but policy is usually a very incremental and deliberative process. Secondly, when I was studying my master's in public policy, there was something called the muddling through theory. Muddling means you don't know what you're doing and you're just muddling through. So there's a muddling through policy theory, which means we don't really know what we're doing, but we're just trying to make the best of the situation. So there's a bit of that happens in any policy situation. So muddling through an iterative and deliberative process. So, transport policy is one of the most complex and most difficult pieces of policy. And even if it was done last year, we have something called policy reviews. We have policy evaluations. Policies are usually for a particular policy cycle, sometimes 5 years, sometimes 3 years, sometimes 10 years. So it gets reviewed and renewed. So any evidence along the way needs to be fed into that. But certainly, if once a policy is up, it doesn't mean it's over, because, there are versions of the policy. It changes iteratively and slowly and deliberatively. And it's where are we as researchers or stakeholders? How can we input into that iterative process? We need to understand where that's at. Often we don't know. We just look at it from the outside, but because we're not engaged enough, we can't engage sufficiently. So I led a study of looking at supply chains. In Australia is a very big continent, as you know. Top part of Australia only has 6% of the population, but 40% of the landmass. And our transport and road systems are terrible. So if we're trying to do economic development in Northern Australia, our supply chains need to be effective. And for that to be effective, transport policy has to be really good. So we led some studies looking at supply chains across Northern Australia. We called it Reimagining Supply Chains. But to get a policy renewal in that, I invited all of the big truck companies, ports, airports, anyone who has skin in the game that the government will listen to my research consultations. I had more than 120 stakeholders coming to an agreement on what are their challenges and what should the government do about it to inform policy. So that went into as part of the research data, and also we got letters of support, etc. We got some of the key companies to write forwards of our research about why this research was important to feed into that process. So I think you can do some very good things to help our policymakers to move the policy around. One of my findings is two things. Sometimes the politics is ahead of the policymakers, and sometimes the policymakers are ahead of the politicians. And that timing is important because one rules the other, the budget decrees, the legislation. So helping that process in a gentle and relational way is very critical. And having any evidence that can support that will really help move that transport policy.
Thank you, Professor. I also invite Pak Azwar dan Pak Uke for answering the question how to improve our condition, which is, for example, like the policy analysis is still ongoing, but the policy itself already running. That's what usually happens, right? In here. So how can we improve that, Pak Azwar and Pak Uke?
Thank you, Mas Andre. How we can improve? So indeed, in policymaking, we often distinguish between long-term policies and short-term decisions. So I think we can plan the policies more carefully, and we can call the dynamic situational decisions in everyday life as short-term decisions. So the challenge arises because, as you pointed out, analysis is often done after the policy is already being implemented rather than beforehand. To improve this, we need to strengthen institutional processes that require policy impact assessments and academic review before approval, even in fast-moving situations. And also, regulatory frameworks can incorporate flexibility for emergencies while maintaining standards for evidence and legality. So I think that is the long-run solution, but in the short run, yes, you can do some political navigation and vocation to regional head, I think. And Mas Andri, I want to clarify before to Mr. Pandi from South Bangka. So the survey I mentioned in my presentation is from a study by Colonia et al. Titled trust in scientists and their role in society across 68 countries. So later, when you download my presentation, you can see the link and the sources. So the survey involved over 71,000 respondents, and their findings show that in most countries, people generally trust scientists and support them. Right? However, I understand that at the regional level in South Bangka, the situation might differ due to local context. So this difference highlights the need to address specific local challenges in building trust between scientists, policymakers, and communities. It also shows that while global trends provide useful insights, addressing local realities requires specific strategies to improve relationships and participation. Thank you, Mas Andri.
Okay, thank you, Pak Azwar. Pak Uke, you have
Thank you,
comments? Yeah.
I believe the question is what government do if there are immediate urgent needs to develop policy. Good point, Mbak Ratih, that Bappenas, yes, we develop annual work plan, government work plan is a year before. So what happened? What we do if something happen needs immediate action, immediate policy development. I can assure you that Bappenas never apply policy without evidence-based or study or academic paper. Never. So I can assure you every policy came from Bappenas is always backed up by study or academic analysis. I can give you three big examples. First, chaos in 1998 when we have democratic reformation. There are turmoil across the nation. That Bappenas at that time developed quick study to respond to the situation and apply the policy. And the policy is appreciated by the president. Our senior officer achieved Bintang Mahaputra, yeah, medal for the president for policy achievement at that time. And the second is COVID-19. COVID-19 also shocked our government that we need to develop quickly, immediate policy action. But in this case, usually, we separate. One is emergency action that we should anticipate the immediate symptom. But in the mid range and the long term, we develop policy that ensuring that the negative effects should be recovered. The COVID, and the third is tsunami Aceh in 2005 also one of the example that we need develop policy quickly. That's what we already done, and thanks to our developing partner that already always provide us assistance in many resources to develop that kind immediate study. I hope this answered the question of Mbak. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Uke. Now, before we get into the closing section by the head of Research Center for Public Policy, I want three speakers comes with a brief closing statement. What do you want to say to policymakers, to policy scientists, to policy analysts, how we all together can safeguard the evidence-based policy making in Indonesia to make governance practice? Let's start from Pak Azwar.
Okay. Thank you, Mas Andri. And as we know, we live in an age where information is everywhere, but wisdom in policymaking depends on two pillars. First is evidence, and second is participation. Data tells us about what works, but people tell us what matters. When we ignore the evidence, we risk failure. When we ignore the public, we lose legitimacy. True progress happens when research meets reality, when policies are not only technically sound, but also socially grounded. If you want resilient, responsive governance, then scientists, policymakers, and citizens must sit at the same table. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Azwar. That is very sharp. Now, Pak Uke.
Thank you, Andri. As a government representative, I can assure you that government of Indonesia always develop policy based on study or scientific-based analysis. Yes, there are many rooms for improvement. We are more than happy to have input to improve our capability to develop policy in a better way. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Uke. Very open, yes, sir, for collaboration and for inputs from all sectors. Now, the last but not least, Professor Hurriyat.
I say three things. One is be aware of the policy environment and what is needed. Is your research irrelevant to policymakers? Make it relevant. First point. Second point, target the research and its methodology. Make sure that the methodology involves a strong stakeholder analysis. I put that as a methodology even before literature review, even before data collection, stakeholder analysis. And also be clear of what the outputs are other than a journal article or a conference paper before you start your project. 3, try to be known to the policymakers. If they know you in any way, if they engage with you, if they have buy-in, they will trust the research you're giving.
Thank you, Professor Hurriyat. I ask for Professor Hurriyat, Pak Uke, and Pak Azwar to include the list of references that the audiences can use. Yeah, I see in the slide Professor Hurriyat already include all the references, and perhaps Pak Uke and Pak Azwar, we will be grateful if you can include the list of references so all the audience can learn further from the list. Now we get into the end of our session. We invite Bu Yanti, the head of Research Center for Public Policy, for delivering the closing remarks. Bu Yanti, are you with us?
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mas Andri. Okay, is it okay? Is it clear?
Yeah, clear.
Okay, yeah. Finally, thank you everyone for your active participation in this workshop today, and a special note of appreciation goes to our expert speakers for their insightful presentation and for fostering the discussion today's make it happen, yeah. Thank you for Prof. Hurriyat, Bapak Uke Muhammad Hussein, and also Mas Azwar Aswin. And special thank to our fantastic working team for the hard work and were essential to the success of this event, and we are very grateful to you all. As already mentioned, I think for all the speakers that already mentioned today, and the discussion is very important, and they already have some highlight from 3-hour speaker that is we need more collaborative, and don't forget to publish your research that Prof. Hurriyat mentioned, and make the policy maker know about your research and what you're to do. I think this is an important point that we should work together between academician or researcher and also policymaker to make it happen. How the evidence-based policy, evidence-based to be a policy, I think. So as we conclude this discussion, it is clear that advancing evidence-based policymaking in Indonesia is a collective endeavor So by strengthening our data infrastructure, I think it's very important. Empowering researcher, it is also because BRIN is with a researcher in our organization. It is very important to empowering the researcher and also fostering a culture of evidence within our governance structure. And also we can move beyond mandates and create policies that demonstrable improve lives and shape a more prosperous future for all Indonesian. And already mentioned also by Bapak Uke from Bappenas was very happy, and they also already mentioned that all of the policy by Bappenas is using evidence based, and so BRIN also will support of our research, Bapak Uke, to send our research to be evidence-based policy in Bappenas and also in other ministries in Indonesia. So I think it is important that Indonesia's governance practice truly serve the needs and aspiration of its people and also translating mandates into meaningful positive change. So I think the time for action grounded in evidence is now. So finally, I would like to say thank you once again for all of participant speaker, and we hope to see you again for next elaborasi with next special and other insightful topic with us, Research Center for Public Policy. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Bu Yanti,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So,
Bapak Chan, thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Hudayat.
Yo, Ibu Yanuar.
Ya,
as a
salam
part
kenal, Pak.
Terima
of
kasih. Saya izin pamit.
Thank you.
as a part of our custom here in Indonesia, we always make pantun. But today, I am helped by Pak Safrizal to get a pantun using AI from the learning machine. So the pantun is from mandate seat, a whisper starts. Through halls of power, it finds its parts. Debate take hold, a complex weave of voices loud and what we believe. Yet not in ink its journey ends, but in the world where impact wends. From paper dreams to leaves it shapes, a ripple felt in varied scapes. Thank you for
Excellent.
all
Thank
the
you, thank you. Oke. Izin
and
pamit
we are
semua.
Ya, terima
yeah,
kasih,
we'll
Pak Uke.
again in the next opportunity in elaborasi. Goodbye everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Don't
Thank you.
forget to fill your presence list
Thank
in the
you.
link. Thank you
Bye-bye,
all.
everyone.
Hostnya di sana.
Thank you Pak Safrizal.
Terima kasih Pak Andri.